Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. Her phone vibrated against my knuckles as I grabbed my keys. I'm Daniel, 29. The screen woke to a close shot of her hand with a diamond. One word floated under it, trial, followed by a red heart that didn't feel cute. I didn't breathe. I flipped the phone over, then back again. The date stamped under the photo landed next month. Heat climbed my neck as a timer beeped behind me. Something was about to burn. The front door clicked. She came in chewing fast, eyes glossy from wind. "You're up early," she tossed, then nudged the phone with a fingertip. The screen died and she watched my face like a ref. "Who's trying rings at breakfast?" I kept my tone even. I moved the pan off the heat and set the spatula down. She laughed once and held my shoulders like I was drifting. "Relax," she tried, too light for the weight in the room. I tapped the phone. It woke again like a guilty blink. The thumbnail waited where I'd left it. "Cute manicure," I said, and my chest tightened on purpose. She reached for the phone and missed by half an inch. "Client shoot," she said with a shrug that didn't land. "We're brainstorming looks." Her smile held steady, but her throat worked twice. "I didn't know you were doing weddings." I rinsed the pan so I had time. She shifted her stance and rolled a sleeve like she might bolt. Her pulse flickered at her neck as the phone buzzed again. A calendar banner slid down, venue walkthrough at 11. She swiped it away so fast her nail clicked. My eyes tracked the motion because something inside me already knew. "Work," she kissed my cheek, quick and cool. "Tight day." She tossed the phone into her tote and missed the pocket. It thumped against the table like a dare. I picked it up and placed it on top. She watched my hand the way you watch a glass on an edge. "Send me the mood board," I said with a dry throat. She nodded, then froze because no board existed. Silence spread thin, breakable, loud. "I'm late," she announced like a lifeline. She grabbed the tote and slung it high. The strap twisted and stuck as if the room resisted. At the door she paused. "Dinner tonight." It sounded like a plan and a plea. "We'll reset." She held my stare until my eyes moved first. When the door shut, I let out the breath I'd been hiding. I replayed that photo in my head and tried to blink it dull. Trial meant test, but the heart meant promise. My palms itched for proof I hadn't earned. Her laptop bag sat where she left it last night. I didn't touch it because I still wanted to respect us. Instead, I opened the fridge and closed it again. Hunger wasn't the problem, and the clock knew it. A new text banner crawled across the dark phone. "Final count for rehearsal dinner." I wasn't supposed to see it, but it landed anyway. My hand hovered inches away and shook like a bad alibi. I stepped back and planted my feet on the tile. I told myself I would wait for her version tonight. Then the phone buzzed again and my resolve cracked like thin ice. The world had moved to a schedule I hadn't joined. I grabbed my jacket and headed for her office. I didn't text, I didn't warn. The elevator mirror showed someone focused and wired. I recognized him and didn't like the odds. Outside her building, I stood behind a column and watched. She exited with a planner I'd never met, both brisk and efficient. They spoke close and checked a list with tight nods. My jaw clicked as a car pulled to the curb. She opened the back door and glanced around like the city might answer. The planner slid in first and kept talking. My eyes drifted to the driver who wore a black suit. He held a sign on his lap that said rehearsal. I felt my stomach lift and drop like a missed step. I almost called her name and almost broke something. Instead, I turned away and counted 10 slow beats. When I looked back, the car was already merging. I followed on foot until the light turned red. The car vanished behind traffic and a bus shuddered between us. My chest hammered against my ribs without rhythm. I decided to stop chasing because I wanted the truth delivered. Back home, I set the phone exactly where I'd found it. The screen stayed dark like it understood mercy. I poured water and didn't drink it. The door swung open 10 minutes later like she'd trained it. She dropped the tote and reached for me with careful hands. "I shouldn't have rushed," she whispered and scanned my face. I waited because my next move would define everything. She waited because mine would force hers. "Tonight," I said, and the word felt heavy. "All of it." She nodded with a tiny flinch like a wire tightened. The phone buzzed again between us and neither of us moved. I walked past her to the window and kept my back straight. Somewhere a siren rose and fell and then held. She stood behind me and touched my arm once. I didn't turn because the ground was still shifting. "Daniel," my name landed soft then sharpened. "Please trust me one more day." I watched our reflection blur as another notification ghost. D. The glass. My answer stayed inside my teeth for now. I wanted her to pick truth without my hand on the scale. She exhaled like relief and fear braided together. I knew the braid would snap tonight. Her tote tipped as she reached the elevator. Papers slid toward the floor. I caught them before they scattered and froze on a heavy envelope. Gold lettering stamped my nerves like a boot. She lunged, gentle voice wrapped in urgency. That's work. Her fingers hovered over mine, too careful for office mail. I released it because I wanted her to prove me wrong. We walked to the street in a tight orbit. Dinner, she reminded me, chin high and steady. 8. I nodded once and let her go because the clock had teeth. I tailed the courier instead of her, an impulse, not a plan. He crossed to a print shop and signed for a sealed box. My gut clenched as he left it on a shelf marked Rush. The clerk waved me forward when a couple cleared out. Pick up name. His pen hovered and waited. I gave hers and watched his eyes flick to the label. He set the box down like it held glass. ID required. His tone flattened when I hesitated. My mouth went dry and my chance thinned to a thread. Wrong day. I stepped back and studied the lid. Embossed initials looped together, not hers alone. The air pressed hard against my chest and demanded motion. I didn't push the counter again. I circled the aisles and watched a designer trim samples. She hummed as she stacked proofs into neat bands. One proof slipped under a display and stopped near my shoe. I crouched and slid it out slow, 2 lines centered on creamy cardstock, her full name paired with a man I didn't know yet. My thumb dug a half moon in the margin. The font felt expensive and final. A date next month sat there like a dare I had to accept. Careful with those, the designer clicked her tongue and held out her palm. I handed it over and kept my face blank. My pulse hammered loud enough to draw attention. Outside, I leaned on a parking meter and counted to 5. I wanted to break something easy, maybe my certainty. Instead, I hit record on my brain and listed facts. I walked to her building and waited across the street. A coworker stepped out with takeaway and spotted me on instinct. You here for the tasting? She asked while adjusting a cuff. What tasting? My voice scraped as it left my throat. She blinked once and tucked her chin. The caterer thing, she muttered, then hurried away like the sidewalk burned. I followed her line of travel with my eyes. A white van idled at the corner with a chef's logo. A driver hopped out holding trial menus and checked a clipboard. He called a name that matched the invite proof. I felt the axis tilt a degree and keep turning. I memorized the number on the van and the website painted near the bumper. My phone vibrated with a new email subject. You're added as a guest editor, open to confirm. I tapped with care and a shared folder blinked alive. Inside waited a seating chart and dietary notes. Her mother's name sat at table 1 beside the groom's father. My lungs forgot how to be useful and then remembered. A comment bubble flashed on the chart. Move him near the stage, the groom typed hours ago. She prefers that side. My jaw clenched and unclenched until it hurt. I scrolled until my thumb ached. Payment confirmations stacked like cairns along a path, deposits, rentals, a band schedule locked to that weekend. I stopped on a detail that cut different. A hotel block reserved under her last name, not his. She had kept control where she could, and that made it worse. I closed the folder and found my reflection in the screen. I looked focused to the point of dangerous. I understood that look because it once meant loyalty. She texted then, bright and casual, 8 still good, no emoji this time, a clean statement with no place to hide. 8, I replied while my knuckles whitened, 3 dots flickered and vanished. I pictured her weighing which truth would cost less. I booked a table at a quiet place she disliked. Fewer memories meant fewer bargains. I wanted a conversation with no shortcuts and no soft landings. On the way home, I detoured past the hotel named in the file. A bellman called the block name to a colleague without noticing me. He handed over welcome bags with both initials printed large. I didn't touch anything, I just watched the bags change hands like currency. A simple exchange, but it told me everything I needed for tonight. Back on the sidewalk, I swallowed the last of my denial. I prepared questions that left no exits. She would either torch the lie or lean into it. The day bled into evening with sharp edges. I ironed a shirt I normally avoided. It scratched at my neck like a reminder that comfort had left the room. At 7:50 I arrived and chose the corner. She walked in at 8:01 with careful steps. Her smile appeared on command and failed to stick. Thanks for booking. She placed her phone face down and rested. Her palms flat. I kept mine visible and steady because I wanted no confusion. I visited the print shop. I let the words hang like a weight over the table. Her eyes flinched left, then returned. She folded one hand over the other and waited for the next blow. I saw the names and the date. My tone stayed even and unforgiving. I saw the chart and the notes. The room narrowed to our table and the space between our faces. She started to speak and stopped. Water arrived and she didn't touch it. I watched her decide which version of herself would show up. A muscle in her cheek twitched like a signal. I planned to tell you tonight. She leaned forward as if proximity could change facts. My chest locked and then loosened so I could finish this. You're engaged? I spoke it clean so we both heard it, and you let me find it piece by piece. That last line tasted like metal and I didn't spit it out. She blinked slow like bracing for surf. It's complicated. She reached for my wrist and paused an inch away. I didn't move because movement would feel like permission. Skip complicated. I slid my hand out of reach and flattened my palm again. Choose honest. The word landed between us and refused to move. Her shoulders dropped a notch and stayed down. I broke it off in my head months ago. She glanced at the door and then back at me. Everything else kept moving without me. I let silence pin us until she shifted. The waiter hovered and retreated. That tiny retreat told me he recognized this battlefield. She inhaled like she might dive. He knows nothing about you. Her voice steadied on the last word. I heard the admission behind the admission and felt my last attachment fray. Then he learns tonight. I pulled my phone and opened a new message. Her pupils widened and tracked my thumb like it was a trigger. You don't want that? Her breath shortened enough to show. Not like this. She pressed her palms together and held them at her chest as if praying would restart time. I put the phone away and watched tension drain then surge. At least you care about how it looks. I wasn't proud of the line, but it was true. The truth kept its own rules and I was done bending. She nodded once, not in agreement, but in recognition. You're right. She squared her shoulders for the first time today. I'll fix it before sunrise. Fixing starts now. My voice dropped to ground level. Your phone, calendar, invitations, every open loop gets closed tonight. I didn't blink until she moved. She slid the phone across the table and unlocked it, a quiet surrender without theatrics. The screen brightened and filled with tasks that would hurt. I listed them without raising my tone. She executed each with shaking fingers and no excuses, a record of endings lined up in neat rows. When the last message left her outbox, she looked smaller. I will face him in person tomorrow. Her lips barely formed the words, but they were clear. The promise hung there with no guarantee attached. I stood because my body refused the chair any longer. We finished this at your place. I picked up the bill and left cash without counting it. The manager watched me and looked away like he wished he hadn't heard us. Outside, the night pressed close and loud. We walked apart by 2 steps that felt like miles. She reached for my sleeve and let go before touching. At the curb, a car slowed and then continued. I opened the door for her and didn't follow. I'll be right behind, I said, and the phrase tasted final. She nodded and got in without looking back. The driver checked my face in the mirror, then rolled forward. I watched the taillights blur and knew what I would do next. I tailed her ride with 2 cars between us. The map pulsed on my dash and counted down blocks. At her building, I parked crooked and jogged to catch the elevator. My pulse set the pace and wouldn't slow. She opened her door before I knocked. We finish it, I said, and stepped past her without ceremony. She locked the deadbolt with a stiff wrist and nodded once. A notification chimed from a smartwatch on the counter and froze us. Open your planner. I pointed at the laptop and waited. Her fingers hovered, then tapped a password with shaky precision. The desktop bloomed with folders I hadn't seen before and my jaw clenched. A draft post waited inside a scheduler. Caption ready, time set for the morning after vows. I clicked edit and watched her mouth tense. Delete it, my voice carried like a court order. She pressed backspace and swallowed hard. The empty field blinked like a wound and demanded more. A toolbar flagged a queued newsletter. Families, timelines, vendor credits. I hovered over send and then backed away. You will write a clear update before bed. Her phone lit with a name I didn't know. She flipped it over and planted her palm on top. Unknown number, she tried, and her throat worked. The number repeated and held steady. I slid the device closer and let it ring out. Voicemail. Dropped and a transcript crawled across the screen. Confirming final fittings tomorrow. Please bring fiancé. Heat climbed my spine with each word. I opened a notes app and started a list. Tasks to shut doors, calls to make, accounts to revoke. She watched the bullet points grow and gripped the back of a chair. Your storage locker. I stared until she nodded. She pulled a key from a dish and set it down. Metal clicked against wood like a clock starting. We walked downstairs and crossed the street to a rental unit. She rolled up the shutter and I stared at stacked boxes. Names marked the tops in tidy print and one label stopped my breath. I cut the tape with a worn card and lifted the lid. Inside lay programs tied with twine. I took one and read the running order like a stranger. She flinched when my hands trembled. Back upstairs, I closed the box and locked the unit. She drove the key into her pocket and didn't look at me. We moved in silence because anything else would be cheap. At the table, I opened her banking app. Refund confirmations dotted the feed like dropped pins. A balance fell with each tap and she winced. Money wasn't the point, but it burned anyway. A group chat pinged with a ring louder than before. Bridesmaids bubbled on the header with exploding hearts. She looked ill and typed 3 words, pause, then erased them. Type what is true. I held the screen where she couldn't escape. She wrote a short message and hit send. Replies fired back with shock and frantic questions she ignored. Her door buzzer crackled and my stomach flipped. She went white and stared at the intercom. The buzzer hit again with impatient rhythm. Who is that? I asked, but I knew. She pressed talk with a finger that shook. A man's voice filled the hall with forced calm. I'm here to drop off the ring insurance paperwork. I felt my molars grind. Leave it with the concierge. My answer came faster than hers. I held down the button and didn't give space. The voice paused, then agreed, then faded into static. I stepped back and took stock of her face. Exhaustion, panic, relief fighting shame. The mix looked honest for the first time today, and it hurt. Her mother called next with a video request. It flashed twice, then again, then again. She killed the screen and leaned into the wall. She will know by morning. Not morning now. I opened a new message and started typing. She watched my thumbs like they might explode the room. I asked for a time to talk tonight and hit send. We waited for the dots to appear. They didn't. Another call flashed instead. She let it ring to the end and folded over the counter. Her back rose and fell like a tide she couldn't control. I will go with you when you tell him. I heard myself say it and tasted iron, not to protect her, but to stop the story from warping. She straightened because the offer carried weight. Tomorrow noon, she stared at the floor and drew a breath. He meets me near the courthouse. The choice of location told me she wanted witnesses. Before noon, I added, and her eyes flicked up. He learns tonight that you are not available. The word available landed ugly and correct, and neither of us flinched. I opened my messages and drafted 3 lines to him, direct, verifiable, no insults to muddy evidence. She watched my screen and didn't ask me to stop. My finger hovered over send and paused. I looked at her to confirm this final step. She nodded once with a small quake in her jaw. That was all I needed. I sent it, delivered. The status shifted. Read. The typing bubble flashed and vanished and flashed again. I stared at the changing dots like a countdown. Her phone lit with his name this time. It pulsed and held and pulsed again. She didn't touch it. The room waited with me and chose a side. Answer it on speaker. My voice held steady because mine needed to. She hesitated for a breath and complied. The call connected as my pulse spiked. Who is this? His tone tried for civility and failed. I set the phone on the table and leaned forward. I'm the person you need to hear before you wake up. Silence opened like a trap we both saw. He exhaled through his nose and regrouped. If this is some prank, I have lawyers. My laugh came out short and sharp. Save them for contracts. This is about facts. I gave him the bare outline and let it hang. He asked for dates and I gave him tonight's. He asked where I lived and I declined. He asked if we were together now and she winced. We are in the same room closing your event. I kept it clean and left no room for tricks. He went quiet like someone counting losses. Then the line clicked dead. We waited 10 seconds, 20. The screen stayed black. She placed both hands on the table and steadied herself. I knew another hit was coming and braced. A new message arrived from an unknown number. Short, not a threat, not a plea, just a location pin and a time 2 hours from now. Is that him? She nodded once without lifting her eyes. The pin hovered over a hotel lounge downtown. He wanted neutral turf and I understood why. You going? My voice sounded like gravel and decision. She wiped her face and stood taller than before. Yes, one word, clean and final like a signature. I grabbed my jacket from the chair and checked my pockets. She did the same with quick, precise motions. At the door she hesitated and touched my elbow. I didn't pull away. We walk in together, I said, and the promise hurt. She nodded and turned the lock. The hallway echoed as we stepped out, and the night answered with another incoming call. We reached the lounge early and took a table by the wall. She folded her hands and stared at the entrance. I kept my back straight and watched the elevators. The room hummed like a held breath waiting to break. He arrived without a coat and scanned for us. His jaw set when our eyes met. He crossed the floor fast and stopped short. No handshake, no pretense, just impact waiting. Talk. He dropped into the chair and leaned forward. His gaze flicked between us like a metronome. I placed my phone face up and unlocked it. He nodded once, daring me to begin. I'm not your enemy. I kept my tone even and cold. I'm here to end confusion. He flattened a palm on the table and exhaled, then end it now. She opened her mouth and closed it. Her throat moved, but no sound came. He flinched at that silence more than my presence. I caught the tell before he buried it. You can ask me anything, I said, steady and specific. Dates, messages, plans. I pushed a printed screenshot across the table and let it sit. He didn't touch it. You slept with her? His voice cracked like an ankle on a curb. He didn't blink. I didn't look away. Yes. The word landed like a gavel between plates. He stared at the paper and finally dragged it closer. His lip twitched as he read details he already feared. He turned it over, then turned it back. The surface trembled under his fingers. She reached for his arm and stopped an inch short. I wanted to tell you earlier. Her face tightened and held. He laughed once and it sounded like a cough. Wanted isn't did. He pulled his arm away and straightened. How long? He looked at me, not her, and I understood that choice. Weeks, I answered and braced. He closed his eyes like bracing for a swing. When he opened them, they were colder and clearer. Why meet me at all? I heard something almost protective under the anger. Because lies thrive in gaps, I said without apology. We seal them tonight. She nodded like a verdict had been entered. He shook his head as if to clear water. A server approached and retreated as if burned. The three of us pretended not to notice. Time pooled on the table and refused to drain. Finally, he pointed at her phone. Unlock it. He didn't raise his voice. She complied without bargaining. He scrolled with tight focus until his jaw ticked again. He stopped on a calendar entry marked private. He tapped it open and went still. Beach weekend, he read, then locked the screen. His thumb left a faint smear on the glass. That booking is gone, she said, barely above a whisper. Everything is canceled. He nodded like acknowledging a traffic sign. Everything, he repeated, and the word hung heavy. He turned back to me with study, not fury. What do you want from me tonight? I let the question breathe before answering. Clarity, then distance. He considered that and accepted the shape of it. You will not contact her again after this. His gaze pinned me to the chair. After we close the last loop, I replied. What loop remains? He drummed 2 fingers and waited. I pulled a printed seating map from my jacket and slid it over. Family notes, vendor access, insurance papers. He scanned the map and smirked without joy. You really did the homework. I looked at him and didn't flinch. I wanted facts to speak. He tapped a name on the chart and froze. He doesn't go anywhere near her again. He wasn't talking to me now. He was talking to himself, a promise in the making. She reached for water and missed the glass. I will speak to my mother tonight. Her eyes stayed on the table. Do it now, he answered, flat and immediate. She pulled out her phone and dialed. It rang long enough to sting. When the call connected, she spoke quickly and cleanly. She used words that couldn't be softened. He listened without interrupting, arms crossed tight. I watched his knuckles fade and return as he squeezed. She ended the call and set the phone down gently. Done, she said, and didn't look up. His eyes watered and cleared. He turned the ring on his finger like a dial. The policy allows returns within 30 days. It sounded like logistics, not heartbreak, which hurt worse. You will get every receipt you need, I said. He nodded once and tucked the ring back into his palm. I'm not asking you for help, he replied, but he didn't push it away. A text arrived on her screen from a contact named Planner. Final timeline attached. Urgent. He read it upside down and barked a laugh. Even the schedule refuses to die. She typed a short reply and hit send. Pull the plug, she wrote and showed us both. He stared at the words like they were a photo. F the sun. He turned to me with measured curiosity now. Where does it end for you? I had the answer loaded before he finished. At my door tonight. After you block her, he said, testing the edges. I held his stare and didn't blink. After she walks out, after she leaves both of us alone. She swallowed that line like medicine. I will go after this meeting, she said, her voice steadied on go. My chest loosened and tightened in the same beat. He picked up the bill and set down a card. His hand shook, then stilled. He looked older by a year and younger by a lie gone. I will not cause a scene, he added, and I believed him. We stood together without touching, three people rearranging a future at a small table. He stepped back and touched his forehead like checking for fever. Then he composed himself and faced me square. One more thing, he said with careful control. If you ever knew and kept going, we're not civil. I didn't need the warning, but I accepted it. I know. He turned to her with a single nod. Return the ring by noon. Her chin dipped. I will. The agreement clicked into place like a lock catching. He walked away without looking back. We watched his shoulders set as he hit the door. The room resumed normal volume while ours dropped. I felt the reshaped night press against my ribs. She sagged into the chair and covered her face. I waited 3 beats and pulled out my phone. We're not done, I said quietly. She dropped her hands and braced for the last phase. You finish the remaining calls now. I listed them with ruthless calm. She completed each one, voice thin but precise. Every confirmation came with a tiny shudder. When the final email left her outbox, I stood. We go to your place, I said. You gather your things. She nodded and rose on shaky legs but moving. Outside, we walked in step to the curb. A car stopped and opened its doors. She slid in and left space beside her. I didn't fill it. I'll follow, I said, and meant it for this one stretch. She looked ahead and gave a single nod. The car pulled away and I watched it shrink into traffic. My phone buzzed with a new message from him. No words, just a photo of the ring placed on a hotel ledger. A timestamp stamped the corner like a seal. I pocketed the phone and headed to my car. The next part would be clean or it would break us further. I chose clean, then set my jaw and drove. Her door clicked behind us and I headed for the bedroom. Grab what's yours, I said and kept moving. She opened drawers with abrupt motions and tossed clothes into a bag. My focus narrowed to tasks that ended this night fast. I cleared the nightstand and found a small velvet pouch. Inside sat 2 cufflinks engraved with the groom's initials. My stomach knotted and then steadied. I dropped them on the dresser like evidence that wouldn't vanish. Those go back tomorrow, I pointed without touching them. She nodded and zipped the bag hard enough to sting her fingers. A voicemail notification appeared across her screen and lingered. I tapped play and waited for the blow. Her mother's voice filled the room with tight control. We can reframe this if you stop now. No question. A directive. I reached for the phone and hit call back before she could hesitate. Tonight is finished, I told the line and kept it crisp. Everything is canceled and the ring is returned. Silence answered, then a steady breath that carried fury. The call ended without a word and the point was made. She leaned on the doorframe and watched me sort. I opened the closet and pulled a garment bag marked with the venue logo. Inside hung a white dress with tags and a steamer ticket. She made a noise like something tearing and covered her mouth. We deliver it back at opening, I said and zipped it up. She nodded twice like she needed momentum. I set it by the exit where we couldn't ignore it. The room felt like a checklist with a heartbeat that wouldn't calm down. Her smartwatch buzzed on the counter with a terse ping. Planner again, new invoice for last-minute changes. She glanced at me and typed 3 words, stop all charges. A group text from bridesmaids lit the screen with rapid replies. One message flashed a photo of themed accessories already shipped. Another asked if she was safe and if this was final. She typed yes and set the phone down like it burned. I opened her laptop and pulled up cloud folders. I revoked shared access for vendors and family. Each click shut a door that should never reopen. She watched the permissions disappear and steadied her breathing. A knock rattled the peephole and froze us both. She whispered the neighbor's name and moved to answer. I stopped her with a raised hand and checked through the lens. A courier waited with a sealed envelope and a clipboard. Leave it downstairs, I called through the door without opening. He balked and then agreed to drop it with security. Footsteps retreated and the tension thinned. I wanted air and not a single New Delhi. Barry. She pulled a storage bin from under the bed and popped the lid. Inside lay favors with dual initials stamped in foil. I peeled one label and handed it to her. "Trash chute," I said, and she moved like orders kept her upright. My phone buzzed with a short message from him. "Ring surrendered, account closed." A photo of a canceled policy followed, time-stamped and clean. I exhaled once and stored it as proof we might actually end this. "Laptop," I gestured, and she opened a browser window. I watched her delete a pre-written announcement drafted for the morning. She cleared the scheduled post and emptied the queue. Nothing remained in that pipeline except silence. Another ping. An aunt demanded context and sent a time for a family call. She rubbed her temples and stared at the screen. "You join me?" she asked, and I let the request hang. "I won't be their witness," I said, and her shoulders sagged. We carried the garment bag and box of favors to the hallway. She locked the door and pressed her forehead to the wood for one beat. I held the bin and waited for her to turn. She did, eyes dry but red, and took the elevator button like it might bite. In the lobby, the concierge held the earlier envelope. He offered it with a polite nod. I cracked the seal and scanned a single paragraph. It confirmed the final schedule and asked for signatures by noon. "No signatures," I told the desk and slid it back. He logged the refusal with quick strokes and filed the paper. His expression stayed neutral in a way that helped. We moved to the curb because standing still felt like drowning. A rideshare pulled up and we threw the bag inside. She climbed in and left the door open like a question. I leaned down and checked her face for resolve. She met my eyes and held them longer than she had all day. "At my place," I said, and shut the door. I followed in my car and matched lanes behind her. My hand sat tight on the wheel as I rehearsed the final step. It already hurt and it would still happen. At my building, I unlocked the door and stepped aside. She carried the dress inside and set it upright. I laid the favors by the couch and straightened. We stood in a stare that neither of us recognized. "You can sleep on the couch," I said, and the words tasted like stone. "Only tonight. We finish in the morning with returns." She nodded and unclipped her watch like a shackle. It sat on the table blinking with old alarms. Her phone buzzed one more time with an unknown number. She flinched and handed it to me without looking. I opened the text and read a single sentence. "Confirm you remain in the wedding party." I typed a reply that ended any doubts. "No, remove her from all lists immediately." I hit send and watched the checkmark appear. A follow-up confirmation arrived and I let the screen go dark. She wrapped herself in a blanket and curled on the cushions. I brought water and placed it within reach. She didn't drink, which told me she was still engaged in the fight inside her head. I left it there because control needed room. I took my phone to the kitchen and scrolled through our thread. Photos, quick plans, stupid jokes, the usual freight that makes endings heavy. I hovered over the options and felt my teeth set. Not yet. I wasn't finished holding her to the last obligations. I closed the app and set the phone face down. My chest felt like a press and I welcomed it. Midnight ticked past and the apartment refused to sleep. She stirred and looked at me across the room. "Thank you for not abandoning me in the mess," she murmured. I didn't answer because gratitude had no place here. "Return the dress at opening," I said, and checked the time. "Then you leave the keys on my counter and go home." She blinked as if I'd slapped her with a deadline. She nodded anyway because there was nothing else left. I dimmed the screen and watched her settle again. My mind mapped tomorrow in straight lines. Store, hotel, planner's office, no detours, no nostalgia, no second conversations. When I finally stretched out on the floor, the phone buzzed again. Another message from him waited unread. I opened it and saw only coordinates near the courthouse with noon stamped beneath. I stared until my eyes hurt and tucked the phone away. I let the quiet build to a thin hum. I listened for her breathing to even out. It never did. Right before dawn, I stood and made coffee I didn't want. The next move would be the cleanest cut I had left. I shoved the dress across the counter as the doors unlocked. "Return, no reschedule." The clerk reached for a form and tried a polite wall. I slid the receipt under her fingers and kept my stare fixed. She stamped it twice and pushed it back without small talk. Next stop, coordinator's office. I laid the seating map and cancellation emails in a neat stack. "Close every task tied to this event now." She opened a dashboard and hesitated at the lost tally. "All of it," I pressed and watched the toggles flip off in rows. We hauled th. Favor boxes to the hotel desk. "Dispose, do not reroute to guests." The manager searched my face for drama and found none. He keyed a note and cleared the block on his screen. A basket of welcome cards slid away like it never existed. Her phone chimed with her mother's name again. She hovered a thumb over accept and looked at me. I shook my head because I wouldn't referee another performance. She let it ring out and placed the device face down like a guilty coin. By 11 we stood at the courthouse steps. He arrived first with a small envelope and tired eyes. He lifted the paper as proof and tucked it away for later. Families will swarm by dinner, he warned, and I marked the threat as weather. She showed 5 minutes later, hair unbrushed, spine straight. He stared past me and spoke to her directly. You meet me with my sister at 1, we collect the last items. She nodded once and blinked hard but didn't cry. I held out my palm. Keys. She fished them from her pocket and dropped them in. Metal stung my skin and steadied my resolve. Anything else of mine? I asked, and she shook her head once. Can we talk after this? She whispered without moving closer. I stepped back because closeness would alter gravity. There's nothing left to discuss that helps either of us. The line tasted brutal and necessary, and I didn't soften it. She exhaled like a door closing somewhere inside. I loved you, she said to the pavement. My jaw clenched because the sentence landed too late. You loved a hiding place, I answered, and watched the truth cut through the last fog. He checked his watch and gave us space that wasn't kind. I'll wait at the corner, he said, and backed away. She tracked him for 2 beats and then faced me again. Please don't hate me, she added, and my chest tightened. I don't. The words surprised both of us and then settled. I just choose not to carry you. She nodded like taking a punch you saw coming. I felt the ground stop tilting beneath my shoes. I unlocked my phone and opened our thread. Photos lined up like evidence from a better version of us. I selected everything and paused because hesitation tests conviction. Then my thumb moved and the gallery emptied to gray. Don't erase me, she murmured with a tiny lift of her hand. I didn't answer because silence drew the boundary faster. I opened contacts and scrolled to her name and stared at it once. Then I pressed block and watched the confirmation snap shut. She flinched at the click she couldn't hear. That's it, she said with a cracked grin that wasn't joy. That's it, I echoed, and the echo didn't return. Across the street, a cyclist rang a bell like a countdown ending. I removed her from every app I still used. One by one, the prompts asked if I was sure. One by one, I was. A final screen offered to keep memories for later, and I chose later never. He rejoined us and handed her a folded printout. Inventory for 1 o'clock. She tucked it into her jacket like a plea for order. He glanced at me with something close to respect. I nodded once because the line between us was simple now. We're done, I told him and slid the spare key into his palm, in case she forgets anything at my place. He pocketed it without comment and squared his shoulders. We existed on opposite banks with a bridge blown. She tried for one more step toward me and stopped. If I fix everything, does that help you sleep? I lifted my bag and met her eyes. I sleep fine when my boundaries hold. The reply tasted like steel and I swallowed it anyway. I turned and headed down the steps without looking back. My phone vibrated with a fresh flood from unknown numbers. I toggled Do Not Disturb and felt quiet sharpen like a tool. Behind me, their voices blended into the city and faded. At the curb, my rideshare pulled in. I climbed inside and watched the courthouse shrink through the glass. A text preview slid across the lock screen from a bridesmaid I barely knew. I held the power button, watched it go dark, and finally let my fists unclench. Home waited with the dress receipt on the counter. I filed it with the other documents and washed my hands twice. The motions gave my brain something simple to complete. When the sink ran clear, I faced the last open tab. Her chat window still glowed on my laptop, small and insistent. I hovered, not because I doubted, but because goodbyes crave ceremony. Then I clicked block there too, and the window collapsed to a blank square. The apartment didn't feel lighter, it felt accurate. I stood in that accuracy and counted to 10. On 9, a final email from the coordinator arrived and I opened it. Event terminated, all parties notified. I stared at the sentence until my eyes stung. Then I closed the lid and let the room hold the decision. Somewhere a door in the hallway slammed and I didn't jump. I sat on the floor and leaned back against the couch. My pulse slowed from a sprint to something useful. The day had ended like a contour. Act not a poem, I breathed once more, then reached for a fresh start I could trust.